Sergeant Marcus Cole looked her dead in the eyes, smiled, and said it loud enough for every man in the compound to hear. "Somebody tell command to stop sending us babysitters." The men laughed hard. Emily Carter stood there holding her technical documents, dust still on her boots from the helicopter ride in, and she didn't flinch. She didn't argue. She didn't explain herself. She just looked at him, then looked at the mountains surrounding them, and went back to her notes. What Marcus Cole didn't know in that moment was that the woman he just humiliated in front of 30 soldiers was the only reason any of them would still be breathing 72 hours later. Before we go any further, if this kind of story moves you, please subscribe to this channel and follow along all the way to the end. Drop a comment below and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. The helicopter came in lower than it should have, and the downwash from its blades threw a cloud of dry mountain dirt across the entire front section of the outpost. The soldiers of Bravo Company had learned to read incoming helicopters the way farmers read weather. Low and fast meant someone was in a hurry to drop something off and get out. That wasn't a good sign. Low and fast in this part of eastern Afghanistan usually meant whatever was coming wasn't welcome. Sergeant First Class Marcus Cole stood near the gate with his arms crossed, squinting into the rotor wash, and when the helicopter door slid open and he saw what stepped out, he made a sound low in his throat. Not quite a laugh, not quite a curse, something between the two. She was carrying a backpack, a hard-sided equipment case, and a manila folder that she held against her chest with both arms like it might blow away. She was wearing protective gear that was 2 sizes too big for her. Her helmet sat slightly crooked. Her vest was adjusted for someone with a much broader frame. She looked like someone had dressed her for combat at the last possible minute, someone who had never seen combat themselves. She stepped onto the ground, looked around at the mountains with a calm, almost detached expression, and walked toward the gate. Marcus watched her the entire time. Captain Ethan Walker appeared beside him. "That her?" Marcus asked. "That's her," Walker said. He was holding a single-page transfer order. He looked at it again as if reading it for the 3rd time might make it say something different. "Emily Carter, environmental engineer, assigned to the Defense Advanced Research Projects Division. Says here she's been embedded with 3 different programs in the past 4 years." "An engineer," Marcus repeated. "Civilian specialist," Walker said, correcting the word but not improving it. Emily Carter reached the gate and looked up at the two of them. She was 34 years old. She had dark hair, pulled back, sharp eyes that moved quickly and quietly, and an expression that gave away absolutely nothing. She extended her hand to Captain Walker first. "Captain, thank you for having me." Walker shook it. "Welcome to Firebase Kestrel. It's not much." "I don't need much," she said. Then she looked at Marcus. He didn't extend his hand. "Sergeant Cole," Walker said by way of introduction. Emily nodded at him. "Sergeant?" Marcus nodded back, once slow and deliberate, the kind of nod that wasn't a welcome at all. It was an acknowledgement, the way you acknowledge something in your path that you're going to have to work around. She noticed. He could tell she noticed. She just didn't seem to care. That bothered him more than he expected. She was escorted to the small briefing room inside the main building, a room that served as command center, intelligence post, and meeting space all at once. Walker pulled out a chair for her. She set her equipment case down, her backpack down, and placed the manila folder on the table with practiced precision, aligning it square with the edge without looking at her hands. "I'll need access to the Eastern Ridgeline surveys," she said. "Anything your team has mapped in the last 6 weeks, soil composition data if you have it, geological profiles of the surrounding peaks. And I'll need time each morning to observe from the observation point, before 0600 if possible." Walker was writing this down. Marcus stood in the corner of the room, still in the doorway, still with his arms crossed. "What exactly are you looking for?" Walker asked. "Structural vulnerabilities in the mountain geography," she said. "There's been evidence of seismic activity in this corridor that the program I work with believes may be connected to a specific type of underground construction. We're trying to determine whether the terrain itself has been modified." Walker nodded slowly. Marcus made the sound again. That not quite laugh. Emily turned and looked at him directly. "You have a question, Sergeant." "I got about 40 of them," he said, "but I'll keep it to one. How long are you here?" "As long as the mission requires." "And what is your mission exactly? Because what I just heard was that we're supposed to keep a civilian engineer safe while she goes out every morning before sunrise to look at rocks." Emily held his gaze. She didn't flush. She didn't look away. She didn't smile. I'm here to do my job, Sergeant. Same as you. My job, Marcus said, stepping fully into the room, is to keep my men alive. And right now, your presence makes that job harder. This is one of the most contested areas in this entire region. We've had 3 firefights in the last 10 days. We lost a man 8 days ago. We don't have the manpower to assign babysitting detail for a civilian, and I don't have the patience to watch somebody who's never been in combat get rattled the first time a mortar lands close enough to shake the walls. I expected her to argue. He expected her to appeal to Captain Walker. He expected at the very least for her expression to change. It didn't change. She looked at him for a long moment, the way someone looks at a math problem they've already solved, and then she turned back to Walker. I'll need those surveys by tonight if possible, she said. Walker looked between them and cleared his throat. I'll get them pulled together. Marcus walked out. I went directly to his friend and fellow NCO Staff Sergeant David Reyes, who was running drills with 2 of the younger soldiers in the yard. Command sent us a gift, Marcus said. Reyes looked up. I heard. Engineer, civilian, environmental. She's here to look at rocks and terrain profiles. He said it the way you say something that doesn't make sense, and you've stopped trying to make it make sense. Reyes pulled off his gloves and stuffed them in his pocket. She say anything. She said she's here to do your job, same as us. Marcus shook his head. She's got ice in her veins for a civilian. I'll give her that. Didn't even flinch when I pushed. Maybe she doesn't understand what pushed means. She understood, Marcus said. She just didn't care. Reyes looked toward the building. You think Command actually had a reason for sending her here? Command has had plenty of bad reasons for plenty of things, Marcus said. This wouldn't be the first time they dropped a problem in our lap and called it an asset. That night in the cramped sleeping quarters assigned to Emily, she unpacked with the efficiency of someone who had done this many times before. Not the slow, uncertain unpacking of someone adjusting to an unfamiliar environment. Quick, deliberate, organize. Every item went to a specific place. Her equipment case was locked and slid beneath the cot. Her personal items were stacked on the narrow shelf in a way that kept the surface clean and uncluttered. She spread the survey maps Walker had provided across the cot, weighted the corners with her boots, and studied them for 3 hours without moving. Private First Class Danny Okafor knocked on the open door at 2200 hours, holding a tin cup of coffee. He was 22 years old, fresh enough that some of the older soldiers still called him new. And he had been elected by nobody to bring the coffee because nobody else wanted to deal with whatever reaction the civilian woman might have. Ma'am, he said, coffee, if you want it. Emily looked up from the maps. She looked at the coffee, then she looked at him. How do you take yours? She asked. He blinked. Ma'am, your coffee, how do you take it? Oh, black. I mean, there's nothing to put in it anyway, but I'd take it black either way. Sit down, Private, she said. He looked behind him like she might be talking to someone else, then looked back at her. Sergeant Cole said not to. Sergeant Cole isn't here right now, she said. Sit down. He sat down on the edge of a supply crate near the door, holding his own coffee with both hands. She pulled the tin cup he'd brought her closer and looked back at the maps. How long have you been with this unit? She asked. 7 months, he said. This is my first real deployment. What do you think of it? He hesitated. People in positions of authority didn't usually ask questions like that. They told you what to think about it. It's harder than I expected, he said. Not the combat part. I mean that too. But the waiting, the not knowing. Every time things are quiet, I feel like I'm waiting for it to stop being quiet. Emily nodded slowly. That's not a weakness, she said. That vigilance is the thing that will keep you alive. The ones who stop feeling that tension are the ones who get surprised. Danny Okafor looked at her differently than he had when he walked in. Can I ask you something? He said. Go ahead. Why are you here? I mean, really here. Not what the paperwork says. Nobody sends a civilian engineer to a firebase that's been in contact this many times in this short a period. Command isn't careless with civilians. Emily looked up from the maps and met his eyes. Drink your coffee, Private, she said. Not unkindly, but with a finality that meant the question was finished. He drank his coffee. After he left, Emily sat alone in the narrow room, maps spread in front of her, and for a long time she didn't study the terrain at all. She sat very still and she listened to the sounds of the firebase settling around her. The distant shift of a guard at his post. The low murmur of radio traffic 2 rooms over. The particular silence of mountains at night, a silence that wasn't empty, but layered full of things that hadn't announced themselves yet. She had spent years learning to hear the difference. She pressed 2 fingers against a specific point on the survey map. A ridgeline, steep approach, eastern face, commanding view of the entire valley below, including the firebase. Then she opened the manila folder she'd carried off the helicopter. Inside were photographs, satellite imagery, annotated with coordinates and timestamps. She had already known what she was looking for when she arrived. She had known before the helicopter. She had known for weeks. The next morning, Emily was at the observation point before anyone else. This was notable because the observation point required crossing the interior of the firebase and ascending a fixed ladder to a platform that most soldiers avoided in the dark because the 4th rung was loose and had sent 3 different men to the medic in the past month. Emily went up the ladder in darkness, found the loose rung by feel, adjusted her weight around it without hesitation, and was standing on the platform looking east before the first pale light cracked the ridge. Marcus Cole found her there at 0545, an hour after he'd woken, and been told by the night watch that the civilian had been on the platform since before 0400. He climbed up. She didn't look at him when he appeared. She was looking at the eastern ridge with a pair of binoculars. Her notebook was open on the railing. She was making marks in it with a precision that didn't look like casual observation. "You've been up here since 0330, he said. 0322, she said. He stood beside her and looked at the ridge. In the early morning light, it looked like every other ridge in this part of the country. Rock and dust and sharp angles with the specific bleakness that comes from altitude and wind, and a complete indifference to human presence. "What are you seeing?" he asked. Not curious exactly, more professional. He was a soldier who had learned that when something didn't fit the pattern, you looked at it more carefully. "Disturbance patterns in the rock face on the eastern approach," she said. She handed him the binoculars without ceremony. He took them and looked. "Where exactly?" "Approximately 40 meters below the upper ridge line. There's a section where the rock face has been cut differently than the surrounding material. See the color variation, natural erosion creates gradients. That section is too uniform. The cuts are too precise." Marcus looked for a long time. He lowered the binoculars. "You're saying someone cut into that rock face?" "I'm saying someone has been in and out of that ridge in a way that leaves marks. Frequently enough that the marks are accumulating." He handed the binoculars back. He didn't dismiss it. He filed it the way a good soldier files information whose significance isn't clear yet. "You do this with every firebase you visit," he said. "Show up before dawn and read the mountains. It's useful to see a place before it knows you're watching it," she said. He looked at the side of her face. She wasn't performing anything. She wasn't trying to impress him. She was talking about the ridgeline the way someone talks about a thing they understand deeply without decoration. "You know," he said, "I've got men who've been in combat for 6 years who don't have the habit of being up before 0400 to read terrain. Your men are very good at what they do," she said. She lowered the binoculars and made another notation in her book. "But they're looking for the fight they expect. I'm looking for the fight that hasn't announced itself yet." Marcus Cole stood on that platform for another few minutes. He didn't say anything else. When he climbed back down, he didn't know what to do with what he'd just heard, so he filed it the same way he'd filed the ridgeline observation. Later that morning, 3 things happened in sequence that began to shift the temperature of the firebase. The first thing was that Private Danny Okafor mentioned to 2 of his fellow soldiers that the civilian woman had been on the observation platform for over 2 hours before dawn and had identified something on the eastern ridge that might be worth looking at. This created a small, quiet argument between those who thought that was impressive and those who thought she was probably looking at birds. The second thing was that Corporal James Whitaker, the platoon's designated marksman, found Emily standing beside the rifle rack in the equipment room, looking at the long-range rifle with a kind of focused professional attention that made him stop in the doorway. "Can I help you?" he said. She looked at him. "How's your zero on the 2400? He blinked. "Ma'am, your zero at 2,400 meters. The environmental conditions on that ridge will push drift approximately 12 to 15 centimeters east in the afternoon hours, depending on your load. Are you adjusting for that in your morning and afternoon zero checks?" James Whitaker had been the platoon's marksman for 2 years. He was good at his job, he was proud of his job, and he stood in the doorway of the equipment room looking at a civilian engineer who had just demonstrated a level of ballistic understanding that he would have expected from a sniper instructor, not a woman who had arrived with geological survey equipment. He said, I zero at standard conditions. You may want to recalibrate for these elevations, she said. The pressure differential between this valley floor and the ridge is significant. Your effective range changes. Then she walked past him and out the door like she hadn't said anything remarkable at all. James Whitaker stood there for a moment. Then he went and recalibrated his rifle. The third thing that happened was that Marcus Cole pulled Captain Walker aside and said quietly, Sir, something's off about the Carter situation. Walker looked at him. Off bad or off interesting? Off interesting, Marcus said. She identified something on the eastern ridge this morning that I'm not ready to dismiss. And Whitaker just told me she walked him through ballistic drift compensation at altitude like it was the most natural thing in the world. Walker was quiet. I looked at her transfer paperwork again, Marcus said. 3 embedded assignments, all in high-risk areas, all in contested territory, all in regions where the primary concern wasn't environmental at all. Walker nodded very slowly. I think, Marcus said carefully, that we may not actually know who she is. Walker picked up the single-page transfer order he had been holding since she arrived. He read it again. Then he set it down. She hasn't lied to us, Walker said. No, Marcus agreed. She hasn't said much of anything, which is its own kind of information. By the afternoon of the second day, Emily had established a quiet routine that the soldiers of Bravo Company had started almost without realizing it to organize their movements around. She was at the observation point before dawn. She spent the mid-morning studying her survey maps and making notations nobody was invited to look at. She ate meals in the common room with the rest of them without seeking conversation, but without avoiding it either. When spoken to, she answered directly and without wasted words. Private Okafor had started sitting near her at meals. Then Specialist Tara Kim, the platoon's intelligence analyst, started sitting near her too at first because she was curious about the geological surveys, and then because she noticed that Emily had a way of asking questions that pulled information out of a conversation without appearing to be mining for it at all. You've been in places like this before, Tara said during lunch on the second day. It wasn't really a question. A few, Emily said, but not as an engineer. Emily put down her fork and looked at Tara Kim the same way she had looked at Danny Okafor when he asked the question she wasn't going to answer. Drink your coffee, specialist, she said. Tara Kim smiled despite herself. But the dynamic in the Firebase was shifting. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a single moment. It was a slow accumulation of small things that collectively began to change the way the soldiers looked at the quiet woman with the oversized gear. The early mornings on the platform. The ballistic conversation with Whitaker. The way she sat in the common room and listened to everything without appearing to listen to anything. The way she looked at the eastern ridge. Every time someone looked at it, she was looking at it too. Marcus Cole noticed all of it. He was a man who had survived as long as he had in this profession by noticing things, and what he noticed was this Emily Carter was not afraid, not in the way civilians were never afraid, because they didn't understand the danger. That particular kind of unawareness had its own look, a lightness, a sense of not carrying weight that the soldiers around them were carrying. Emily carried weight. She just carried it differently than anyone he'd seen outside of the very top tier of the profession he served in. On the evening of the second day, she found him checking the perimeter alone. The sun was going down over the western mountains, turning everything copper and shadow, and Marcus was walking the fence line with the specific attention of a man who has walked it enough times to know every variation. She fell into step beside him. He didn't ask her to leave. They walked in silence for nearly a full circuit before she said anything. The rock face I identified this morning, she said. It's not just disturbance patterns. He kept walking. Go on. There's a pattern in the timing of what I've been observing. I've been tracking movement signatures for the past 8 months across this entire corridor. Not just this location, multiple positions across the eastern approach to this valley. 8 months, Marcus said. The movement pattern is consistent with a coordinated pre-positioning. Someone has been moving personnel and equipment into the ridgeline in increments, small enough not to trigger individual alarm, but large enough when accumulated to constitute a prepared fighting position. Marcus stopped walking. He turned and looked at her directly. How many positions, he said. At least 4, possibly 6 based on the satellite imagery I have. The 2 I'm most concerned about are the ones with direct line of sight to this firebase, specifically to the observation tower and the main gate. Marcus stared at her. When did you identify this, he said, the full pattern? When did you put it together? She met his gaze without flinching. 3 weeks ago, she said. The silence that followed had a weight to it. 3 weeks, he said, and his voice had dropped to something very quiet and very controlled. You've known for 3 weeks that there are pre-positioned fighting elements on that ridge with direct line of sight to my men, and you are telling me now. I wasn't able to confirm the full scope until I had eyes on the terrain directly, she said. Satellite imagery gives you pattern. Direct observation gives you certainty. I needed both before I could brief anyone at this level. At this level, he repeated. He heard his own voice doing something. At this level, not at the level of the sergeant who is responsible for keeping 30 soldiers alive. I understand why you're angry. Do you? Yes, she said, not defensively, just the word plain. Then understand this, he said, and he stepped slightly closer and kept his voice absolutely level because he was a professional, and he didn't lose control, but his eyes were doing something that had nothing to do with control. Whatever your mission is, whatever command told you to do and not do, the 30 men in this firebase are not a variable in somebody's intelligence operation. They are people, with families, with names. And if you've been sitting on information that affects their survival, I'm telling you now, she said, that's why I'm here. Not as a variable, because in 3 to 5 days, based on the patterns I've been tracking, whoever is on that ridge is going to move. Marcus Cole looked at her for a very long time. Then he said, come with me. He took her to Captain Walker. They sat in the command room and Emily laid out methodically and without drama everything she had, the 8 months of pattern analysis, the satellite imagery, the observation data from 2 mornings on the platform, the 4 to 6 pre-positioned fighting elements, the timeline. Walker listened without interrupting. When she finished, he sat back in his chair and looked at the ceiling for a moment. Then he looked at Marcus. Then he looked at Emily. Why wasn't this communicated up the chain before your arrival, he said. It was, she said, through appropriate channels. And Command sent you here to observe. Command sent me here because there are aspects of the situation that require direct confirmation before any response action can be authorized. The intel was flagged. The location was flagged. This firebase was specifically identified in my tasking because of its proximity to the primary position of concern. Walker leaned forward. Ms. Carter, or whatever your actual designation is, are you telling me that Command is aware that this firebase may be targeted in the next 72 to 120 hours, and the response was to send you here to confirm it? She was quiet for exactly 1 second. The authorization process for a full response action in this corridor requires confirmation from a source with direct observational authority, she said. I am that source. The room was very quiet. And now, Walker said, now I'm going to confirm what I need to confirm, she said, and then you're going to get your support. Walker looked at Marcus. Marcus said nothing, but something had changed in his face. The particular look of a man who has been operating under one set of assumptions and has just had them replaced with a completely different set and hasn't yet worked out what to do with the new ones. He looked at the survey maps on the table. He looked at the photographs Emily had spread beside them. He looked at the ridge lines circled in red in the satellite image. He thought about the 4th rung on the observation ladder, the one that was loose that Emily had navigated in complete darkness on her first morning here without hesitating. He thought about what she'd said to Whitaker about ballistic drift. I thought about the way she'd carried herself off that helicopter, the way the oversized gear had sat on her frame, the way she hadn't argued with him when he pushed at her. Not because she couldn't argue, but because she had decided there was nothing to argue about. He thought about the words she had used, certainty. She had needed certainty before she briefed anyone at this level. Marcus Cole was very good at his job, and one of the things he was very good at was recognizing, even when he didn't want to, when someone else in the room was very good at theirs. He pushed back his chair and stood up. I'm going to go walk the perimeter again, he said. He looked at Emily once more before he left the room. Not the same look as when she'd arrived, something different. Something that didn't have a clean name yet, but that felt underneath everything else, like the beginning of a kind of recognition that takes a long time to fully arrive. He walked out. Emily gathered her photographs and maps. She folded them carefully in order and slid them back into the manila folder. Then she sat alone in the command room for a moment, in the particular silence of a place that doesn't know yet what is coming for it. She pressed her palm flat against the table. She closed her eyes and she listened to the mountains. The night of the second day passed without incident, but not without tension. Marcus Cole barely slept. He lay on his cot in the dark and stared at the ceiling and ran the numbers in his head, the way he always did when something was wrong, and he couldn't name exactly what shape the wrong thing was going to take. 4 to 6 pre-positioned fighting elements. Direct line of sight to the observation tower and the main gate. 3 to 5 days. He'd been in this business long enough to know that enemy timelines never move slower than you expected. They only move faster. At 0200, he got up, put his boots on and went to the perimeter. The night watch was Private Okafor and Specialist Rodriguez. Both of them alert in the way young soldiers get alert when the air has a particular quality to it. Marcus had noticed that quality before, but he hadn't said anything to them about what Emily had briefed because Walker hadn't given the order to brief the unit yet, and until that order came, Marcus would carry the weight of it alone. That was the job. He checked the perimeter. He checked the observation tower. He checked the gate. Then he stood at the base of the observation ladder for a moment and looked up. There was a light up there, faint, shielded. He already knew what it was. He climbed the ladder, found the 4th rung by memory, distributed his weight, and came up onto the platform. Emily was sitting with her back against the railing, a small hooded flashlight angled down at a notebook in her lap. She was writing or drawing something that required careful small movements of her hand. She didn't look up when he came onto the platform, which meant she had heard him coming from the moment he put his hand on the ladder. Marcus sat down on the opposite side of the platform, put his back against the other railing, and looked out at the darkness where the eastern ridge was invisible, but present in the way a thing can be completely hidden and still make itself felt. Neither of them said anything for a while. The mountains at 0200 have a sound that is almost identical to silence, but isn't quite. There's something underneath it, a low, constant, sourceless pressure that veterans of high-altitude deployments learn to either tune out or go crazy listening to. Marcus listened to it. Then he said, "How long have you actually been doing this?" Emily's hand paused on the page. "Doing what?" "Whatever it is you actually do, Ma," he said, "not the engineering, the other thing." She was quiet long enough that he thought she was going to give him another version of drink your coffee, but she didn't. 11 years, she said. He did the math. She was 34, which meant she had started when she was 23. Right out of the gate, he said. More or less. What branch? She looked up from the notebook and met his eyes across the dark platform. He raised one hand slightly. You don't have to answer that. Army Platoon, she said. He nodded once, slow. Special operations, he said. She went back to the notebook. He took that as a yes. How many deployments? He asked. This is my 9th, she said. 9. He was on his 7th and considered himself someone who had seen a substantial portion of what this profession had to offer. And none of them as yourself, he said. She didn't answer that one either, but the way she didn't answer it was its own kind of answer. Marcus looked out at the invisible ridge. I owe you something, he said. You don't, she said immediately. I was out of line when you arrived, he said. What I said, in front of the men. You were doing your job, she said. You assessed a potential liability and you addressed it. I would have done the same. It wasn't assessment, he said. It was assumption. There's a difference. She looked up at him again. Yes, she said. There is. They sat with that for a moment. The ridge, he said. Worst case. Give it to me straight. She closed the notebook. Worst case, she said, is that the pre-positioning is further along than my pattern analysis suggests. That the movement I've been tracking represents the final stage of staging, not the middle stage. That the timeline isn't 3 to 5 days, she paused. That it's already inside that window. How inside of 48 hours? Maybe less. Marcus felt a specific cold that has nothing to do with temperature. Does command know the revised estimate? I sent an updated assessment 4 hours ago, she said. I'm waiting on confirmation that it was received and actioned. And if it wasn't, Emily Carter looked at him across the dark platform and said nothing, which was the most frightening answer she could have given. Marcus stood up. He looked at the eastern ridge one more time, at the darkness where the rock face was cut too precisely, where the color variation meant something that natural erosion didn't explain. I'm going to wake Walker, he said. Yes, she said. I think you should. He climbed back down the ladder, and the fourth rung, as always, shifted slightly under his weight. Captain Ethan Walker was not a man who was easy to rattle. He had graduated top of his class, served in 2 previous deployments that had earned him a commendation. He never talked about and had the particular steadiness that comes from being tested repeatedly and not breaking. But when Marcus came into his quarters at 0230 and laid out the revised timeline, something moved behind his eyes that Marcus recognized as the thing that happened to steady men when the math stopped adding up in their favor. Walker got dressed without a word. They went to the command room. Emily came down from the platform 10 minutes later and laid her notebook on the table. She had been making calculations up there, Marcus realized. Not just observing, working out something that required the kind of precise small movements she'd been making with her hand. Walker looked at the notebook and then at her. Walk me through the revised assessment, he said. She walked him through it. When she finished, Walker sat very still for about 15 seconds. Then he picked up the radio handset and began working up the chain of command. Marcus stood in the corner of the room and watched Emily while Walker made the calls. She had her eyes on the survey map. Her posture was completely still. But her right hand, the one that had been making the careful small movements in the notebook on the platform, was pressing flat against the edge of the table, the way he had seen her press it flat in this room once before. He had thought at the time that it was a habit, a nervous gesture. Now he wasn't sure it was nervous. He thought it might be the opposite. Something she did to stay very, very present in a situation that required everything she had. Walker put the radio down and looked at both of them. Support assets are 40 minutes out minimum response time, he said. Air is further. We have a request in the system, but confirmation is pending higher authority approval because of the location coordinates. Because of the location coordinates, Marcus repeated. Political geography, Walker said. The 2 words carried the weight of everything that was wrong with the situation without adding any additional words to make it worse. So what we have, Marcus said, is a Firebase that may be inside a 48-hour attack window with support that is 40 minutes out on a good day and air assets that are pending an approval that may or may not come before whatever is on that ridge decides to move. That's correct, Walker said. The room was quiet. Then Emily said, then we use what we have. Both men looked at her. What we have is 30 soldiers, a defensive perimeter that has been up for 6 weeks, an observation platform with line of sight to the primary threat positions in approximately 48 hours to make sure every one of those things is positioned as effectively as possible. She spread her hands over the survey map. The enemy has prepared positions. That means they've been in those positions long enough to leave marks. It also means they're committed to those positions. A prepared position is an advantage until it becomes a known position. The moment they commit to the assault, they're fixed. And a fixed enemy is a manageable problem. Marcus looked at her. You've done this before, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes, she said. Outnumbered, insufficient support, hostile prepositioned elements with commanding high ground. Yes, she said again, and something in her voice had changed slightly. Not by much, just enough that he heard it. The particular quality of a person who is not recalling a strategy from training, but from memory. Walker spread his hands on the table. What do you need? Time on the observation platform, she said. Starting now, and I need Whitaker's rifle. The silence that followed that sentence had a different texture than any silence that had come before it in that room. Walker looked at Marcus. Marcus was looking at Emily. Whitaker's rifle, he said. The designated marksman rifle, she said. Yes. You want the sniper rifle, Marcus said slowly. I want access to it so that if the timeline compresses and we find ourselves in a situation where the designated marksman position needs to be filled, it can be filled. Marcus said very carefully, our designated marksman is Corporal Whitaker. Yes, she said, and Whitaker is good. He's better than he thinks he is, which is exactly the right profile for that role. But the positions I've identified on that ridge require engagement at ranges and under environmental conditions that push the edge of what Whitaker has trained for. She paused. I'm not saying he can't do it. I'm saying that if the situation requires it, there should be a contingency. Marcus looked at Walker. Walker said, what's your qualification on that system? Emily Carter looked at him with those eyes that gave away nothing and everything at once. Sufficient, she said. Nobody in that room pressed her further. At 0400, Emily was back on the platform. At 0430, she had Whitaker's rifle broken down, inspected, reassembled, and zeroed for the specific environmental conditions she had calculated the night before. At 0500, she had the rifle back in the equipment room, exactly where it had been, and she was sitting on the platform watching the eastern ridge turn from black to dark blue to the pale gray of very early morning. James Whitaker found out about the rifle at 0600 when Okafor mentioned it in passing and came looking for Marcus with an expression that was equal parts professional injury and genuine unsettlement. She zeroed my rifle, Whitaker said. So I heard, Marcus said. Nobody touches that rifle without, I know, Marcus said. I'm the designated marksman for this. I know, Whitaker. So why did she? Because she needed to know the system, Marcus said. And because whatever she found, she put it back exactly where it was, and it's probably shooting truer right now than it was before she touched it. Whitaker was quiet for a moment. Who is she? He said. It was the same question Danny Okafor had asked, and the same question Tara Kim had asked, with her eyes if not her words. And it was the question Marcus himself had been asking for 2 days in various forms, and the closest thing to an answer he had was the one she had given him in pieces on the observation platform at 0200. 11 years, Army. This is my 9th deployment. She's someone who knows what she's doing, Marcus said. That's enough for right now. Whitaker didn't look satisfied with that, but he went back to his post, and Marcus noticed that he spent the next 2 hours on the observation platform doing something with his notebook that looked a lot like what Emily had been doing with hers. The day of the 3rd day passed with the specific grinding quality of time under pressure. Walker ran the Firebase on modified alert, extra watch rotations, ammunition inventories, medical kit checks. The soldiers felt the shift in tempo without being told why, and the way soldiers always respond to that kind of unspoken pressure. They got quieter and more focused, the social noise of the Firebase dropping away to reveal the professional animal underneath. Emily moved through it all with the same stillness she had brought with her off the helicopter. But there was something different about it now. The stillness wasn't passive anymore. It had an energy underneath it, coiled, impatient, the stillness of a person who has done the preparation they can do and is now waiting for the moment to arrive. At 1400 hours, she came to Marcus. I got confirmation, she said. He stopped what he was doing. The updated assessment was received, she said. Support asset redeployment has been authorized. Air asset approval is through. Timeline for response. They're repositioning now. Estimated arrival window, if activated, is 22 minutes from the call. 22 minutes. Better than 40. Not good enough to be comfortable. And the attack timeline, he said, unchanged, she said, 48 hours from last night's assessment. So we're inside 36 hours now. He exhaled slowly through his nose. We're ready for this, he said. He said it the way you say something when you want it to be true, and you're testing whether saying it makes it more true. Emily looked at him steadily. You are, she said. Your men are solid, Marcus. I've been watching them for 3 days. They're not perfect, but they're professional, and professional beats perfect when things get hard. It was the first time she had used his first name. He noticed it. He filed it. Get some rest this afternoon, he said. If you can. I'll rest when it's over, she said. That's what everyone says, he said. Nobody actually does it. She almost smiled. Go make sure your men eat something. People make better decisions when they're not running on empty. He went and made sure his men ate something. At 1700 hours, Tara Kim picked up an anomaly on the signal monitoring equipment that she had been running continuously since Walker put the Firebase on modified alert. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a clear enemy transmission. It was a pattern of brief low-power signals from the direction of the eastern ridge spaced at irregular intervals that were, as Tara put it, when she brought it to Walker and Marcus, irregular in a very regular way. Emily looked at the signal log for about 90 seconds. That's a check-in protocol, she said. Short intervals, rotating frequency, no content. They're confirming positions and status. Can we track the positions from this? Walker asked. Partially, Tara said. The frequency rotation is too fast for precise triangulation. But the signal strength variations give me a general direction spread. She pointed at the map, consistent with what she identified. Marcus looked at the signal log, then at the map. then at Emily. They're already in position, he said. Not fully, Emily said. The check-in pattern is still orientation mode, not pre-assault mode. There's a difference in the interval spacing. Pre-assault tightens. This is still relatively loose. How much tighter before it goes to pre-assault? When it goes to intervals under 90 seconds, they're getting ready to move. And right now, Tara checked the log. Last three intervals were 140 seconds, 122 seconds, and 138 seconds. Not 90, but moving. Marcus felt the thing that doesn't have a clean name. The thing that lives at the intersection of preparation and inevitability. He had felt it before. Most of the time he felt it. The thing that was coming was already in motion, and there was nothing left to do but be ready for it. I'm going to brief the unit, he said to Walker. Walker nodded. Marcus gathered Bravo Company at 1730 hours. He stood in front of 30 soldiers, and he told them clearly and without softening it what they were facing. Pre-positioned enemy elements on the eastern ridge, confirmed signal activity, a revised timeline that put them inside 36 hours, support assets repositioned and authorized 22 minutes from call, air assets approved and ready. He watched their faces while he talked. These were his people. He knew every one of them. He knew who got quiet when things got serious, and who made jokes as a pressure valve, and who would need to be watched because they went internal, and sometimes internal became frozen when the moment arrived. He had managed all of those different human configurations through 6 previous deployments, and he knew standing in front of them now that they were going to perform. When he finished, nobody panicked. There was a silence, the kind that isn't fear, but is the thing that comes right before the decision to not be afraid takes over from the instinct to be afraid. And then one by one, faces settled into the flat, focused expression of professional soldiers who have been told what they are facing and have decided what to do about it. Private Okafor raised his hand. The civilian, he said. Carter, where does she fit into the defensive posture? Every face in the room turned to look at Emily, who was standing to the side out of the way with her arms at her sides. Marcus looked at her too. Emily Carter looked at Private Okafor with those clear, giving nothing eyes. She's not a civilian, Private, Marcus said. That landed in the room the way he intended it to. The questions were in every face, but nobody asked them out loud because there was something in the way Marcus said it that made the questions feel secondary to what mattered, which was that the person they had been managing their low-level resentment toward for 3 days was apparently something other than what they had decided she was. Emily stepped forward. You have a good defensive layout, she said. There are 3 adjustments I'd recommend to maximize your coverage given the specific positions on the ridge. First, the northern barrier needs to be moved 12 meters east. Where it currently sits, it creates a blind spot between sectors 2 and 3 that anyone who has surveyed this position from the ridge will know about. Second, the observation platform is your most valuable asset and your most exposed position. It needs enhanced protection in a secondary exit route. Third, your ammunition pre-positioning needs to account for a sustained engagement rather than a short contact. If they've been staging for as long as the signal pattern suggests, this is not going to be a probe. It's going to be a full assault. Nobody argued. Nobody asked her who she was or what gave her the right. They just started moving. Marcus watched them move. He watched Emily move with them, not directing from the outside, but inside it alongside Okafor, at the barrier alongside the engineers, reconfiguring the secondary exit from the platform. Her hands on the material of the Firebase, the same way her hand had been on the table and the railing. Always pressing, always making contact with the thing around her. Always grounded. At 2100 hours, Walker got confirmation from command that the support asset repositioning was complete and the assets were on standby. At 2200, Tara Kim reported that the signal intervals had tightened slightly. 115 seconds. 109 seconds, 119 seconds, still above 90, but the direction was clear. Marcus went to find Emily at 2300. She was on the observation platform. She had Whitaker's notebook, the one Whitaker had been filling in after she corrected his 0, and she was checking his calculations against her own. He did good work, she said without looking up. He recalculated everything this afternoon. His adjustments are solid. He's a good soldier, Marcus said. I is, she said. Make sure he knows that before tomorrow. Not the evaluation kind of knowing, the real kind. Marcus looked at her. Why before tomorrow, he said. She looked up from the notebook. She held his gaze for a long moment. Because tomorrow, she said quietly, everyone in this firebase is going to need to know that the person standing next to them believes in them completely. Not out of military courtesy, out of truth. She paused. Go tell him. Marcus went and found Whitaker on his rotation and told him plainly and without decoration that he was one of the best marksmen Marcus had served with, and that tomorrow he was going to prove it. Whitaker looked at him for a moment. This is her idea, Whitaker said. Does it matter? Marcus said. Whitaker thought about it. No, he said, it doesn't. Marcus went back to the command room and sat with Walker, and they went through the defensive plan one more time. They ran communications checks. They confirmed the support asset standby protocol. They set the watch rotation to maximize alertness in the pre-dawn hours when tired bodies made tired decisions, and tired decisions cost lives. At 0100, Marcus allowed himself to sit down and close his eyes for 30 minutes. He didn't sleep, but 30 minutes of stillness was something. At 0215, his radio crackled. It was Tara Kim on the signal monitoring station. Her voice was completely controlled the way it gets controlled when the thing you've been waiting for stops being the future and starts being the present. Sergeant Cole, she said, the intervals just dropped below 90 seconds. Marcus was on his feet before she finished the sentence. He keyed his radio. All personnel, this is Cole. Stand to, now. I was running toward the command room when the first explosion shook the ground beneath his boots, and the night, which had been holding its breath for 36 hours, finally let it out. The first explosion hit the northern barrier at 0219, and Marcus Cole felt it in his chest before he heard it with his ears. That was how it always was. The body knew before the mind caught up. The body had been waiting for this since the moment Tara Kim's voice came over the radio at 0215. The 36 hours of held breath released all at once into chaos, and Bravo Company moved the way they had trained to move fast and without hesitation, because the alternative to fast and without hesitation in the first 60 seconds of a firefight was something nobody in that firebase was willing to think about. Marcus hit the command room at a run. Walker was already there, radio in hand, working the support asset channel. His voice was steady, the particular steadiness of a man who has rehearsed this moment enough times that the rehearsal has become instinct. Kestrel base to Alpha support, activating standby protocol. Say again, activating standby protocol. Grid reference follows. Marcus grabbed his kid off the hook by the door and was moving toward the perimeter before Walker finished the transmission. Outside, the firebase had transformed in the space of 90 seconds from the controlled quiet of a stand-to into something that had teeth. Soldiers at their positions, weapons up, the northern barrier still smoking from the initial impact but holding, because the adjustment Emily had recommended the previous afternoon had moved it 12 meters east and away from the pre-sighted impact point that had been calculated from the ridge. That 12 meters had saved the barrier. Marcus processed this while running. Cole, this is Whitaker, the radio in his ear. I've got movement on the ridge, eastern face, multiple positions. They're illuminated by their own muzzle flash. I can pick targets, but I need authorization. Authorize, Marcus said. Engage. The crack of Whitaker's rifle, sharp and distinct above the general noise of the assault, told him the marksman had been ready. Then the second explosion hit, and this one was closer. Marcus grabbed Rodriguez by the shoulder as the man ran past. Where observation tower took shrapnel, Rodriguez said. Structure's intact, but the communication array on top is damaged. We're down on the long-range antenna. Walker's primary communication channel, the one feeding directly to the support assets. Marcus keyed his radio. Walker, we've got antenna damage on the tower. Your long range is compromised. A 3-second pause that felt longer. Copy, Walker said, working the backup. The backup had less range and more noise. 22 minutes for support assets on a good channel. What it became on a degraded channel in an active firefight with atmospheric interference from the mountains was a number Marcus didn't want to calculate. He found Emily at 0226. She was moving toward the observation tower, not running, moving with that particular economy of motion that he had noticed from her first day on the platform. Each step deliberate, body low. Using the angles of the firebase structures, the way someone uses them when they have thought carefully about where the fire was going to come from before the fire started. Emily, he called. She turned. Whitaker's engaged on the ridge, he said. He's picking targets. But the volume of fire from position 3, he gestured toward the eastern face, is suppressing the entire eastern sector. My people can't move. She looked at the ridge. In the pre-dawn dark, the muzzle flashes from the enemy positions were briefly visible each time they fired. Brief but patterned. If you knew what you were looking for, the pattern told you everything. Position 3 is their machine gun team, she said. I identified it 2 mornings ago. If it stays active, it controls the entire eastern approach. Your men can't reinforce the barrier, and they can't reach the wounded in Sector 2. I know, Marcus said. Whitaker can't engage it from his current position, she said. The angle is wrong. He'd need to shift to the north corner of the platform, and from there his own people are in his line of fire. I know that too, Marcus said. She looked at him. He looked at her. Between them and the noise and the smoke, and the specific controlled chaos of a firebase under coordinated assault, something passed that didn't require words. He had known it was coming since 0215. Maybe since the platform at 0200 the previous night. Maybe since she said the word certainty to him in the command room on the first day. Where is the rifle, she said. Equipment room, he said. She moved. At 0229, Marcus Cole made a decision that he knew in the moment of making it was either the best or the worst decision of his career, and would not become clear which one it was until this night was over. He let her go. He watched Emily Carter move across the open ground between him and the equipment room, and he covered her movement, and he did not call her back. The equipment room door was 30 meters from his position. In a fire base under fire, 30 meters of open ground is a very specific kind of distance. Long enough to be dangerous, short enough that someone who moves correctly might cover it without becoming a casualty. Emily covered it. She moved the way he had seen exactly 3 people in his entire career move under fire with a fluidity that was neither reckless nor hesitant, the body finding the math of the situation. Instinctively, angle and timing and speed combined in a way that training could teach but not create from nothing. Whatever had created it in her had done so over 11 years and 9 deployments. She came out of the equipment room at 0231 with the rifle in her hands. Private Danny Okafor saw her first. He was on the northeastern corner of the perimeter, providing suppressing fire toward a secondary enemy position, when movement in his peripheral vision made him look, and what he saw made him stop firing for a full 2 seconds, which in a firefight is an eternity. Emily Carter, with Whitaker's rifle in a carry position that no civilian ever used, moving toward the base of the observation tower. What is, he started. Eyes front, Okafor, Marcus said from behind him. Keep firing. Okafor turned back to his position, but he had seen it, and Marcus knew that something was being witnessed here that would be talked about for years if they survived to talk about it. Emily reached the base of the observation tower at 0232. The ladder, the same ladder she had climbed in complete darkness on her first morning, navigating the loose 4th rung by feel without hesitation. She went up it now with the rifle across her back, both hands on the rails, and she was on the platform in 8 seconds. Whitaker was there. He turned and looked at her. In the light of the muzzle flashes from the ridge, his face was a mixture of things that didn't resolve into any single expression. He was a professional. He understood what was happening faster than most would have. Position 3, he said, he pointed, 60 degrees from the northeast corner, approximately 840 meters. Wind is coming left to right at this elevation. I've been unable to engage because of the angle and friendly positioning, she said. I know. She was already moving to the position. You're covering the secondary approach. Yes. Stay on it, she said. Don't let them commit to the secondary while I'm dealing with position 3. He looked at her for one more second. Then he turned back to his sector. Emily dropped behind the northeast corner of the platform and brought the rifle up. At 0233, the machine gun position on the eastern ridge had been firing for 14 consecutive minutes, and its effect on the firebase's ability to defend its eastern sector was total. 7 soldiers were pinned behind damaged barriers. 2 men in Sector 2 were wounded and couldn't be reached because any movement toward them crossed the machine gun's beaten zone. Captain Walker had taken shrapnel from the second explosion and was being treated by the medic in the command room while still working the radio, bleeding through a field dressing and refusing to stop transmitting. The firebase was holding, but holding is a temporary condition. Emily looked through the scope. 840 meters, dark, muzzle flash illumination only intermittent, unpredictable in its timing. Wind left to right variable at altitude requiring compensation that Whitaker had calculated, but that she was recalculating now based on what she could feel and the way the smoke was moving around the platform. She adjusted. She breathed. The machine gun position fired again, and in the brief illumination of its own muzzle flash, she had what she needed. She didn't hurry. That was the thing about this kind of work that nobody who hadn't done it understood. The urgency was real. The pressure was total. And inside all of that, the actual act required the opposite of urgency. It required a stillness that the human body resists with everything it has. A stillness achieved not by suppressing the urgency, but by moving through it to something on the other side that was calmer than calm. She had learned that stillness over 11 years. She found it now. She fired. The machine gun went silent. For exactly 2 seconds, the entire firebase went quiet in the way that something that has been making noise for 14 minutes goes quiet. The absence of it was almost physical. Soldiers who had been pressed behind barriers with their teeth, set against the sound of it, lifted their heads without deciding to lift their heads. Then Marcus Cole's voice hit the radio. Sector 2, move now. Get to the wounded. Move. And they moved. Because the gun was silent. Because someone had silenced it. Because of a shot made in darkness at 840 meters by a woman who was supposed to be an engineer. Specialist Rodriguez reached the 2 wounded soldiers in Sector 2 at 0235. One of them, Private First Class Santos, had a leg wound that was serious but survivable. The other, Corporal Hendricks, had taken shrapnel in the shoulder and was conscious and furious about it, which Marcus considered an excellent sign. Get them to the medic, Marcus said. He was already moving again. The assault was not over. Position 3 was down, but the enemy had 5 other active positions on the ridge and they were adapting. Marcus had seen this before. A coordinated assault that loses a key element doesn't stop. It shifts, redistributes. The remaining positions take on more of the load. He keyed the radio. Emily, what are you seeing? Her voice came back immediately, controlled and clear. They're redistributing from positions 1 and 2 to compensate. Position 4 is adjusting angle. They're trying to establish new suppression on the barrier. Can you engage position 4? A 2-second pause. Not from this position. The tower angle puts position 4 behind the ridge fold. I'd need a different elevation or a lateral shift of approximately 40 meters. There is no 40-meter lateral at this firebase, Marcus said. I know, she said, but there is elevation. Marcus stopped moving. He looked at the firebase layout in his head. Elevation, beyond the observation tower. There was nothing beyond the observation tower except the water storage structure on the north corner. A concrete box not designed as a position, not reinforced, exposed on 3 sides. Emily, he said, the water structure is the only viable position, she said. I know what you're going to say. It's exposed. Yes. You'd have no cover. I'd have the angle. Marcus stood in the middle of the firefight and felt the specific weight of a decision that has no good options, only less bad ones. What's your success probability on position 4 from that angle, he said. High, she said, if I can get there. And the exposure risk while you get there, she didn't answer that one, which meant it was real. Marcus looked at the north corner. He looked at the approach. He looked at the positions on the ridge that were still active, still firing, still determining where his people could and couldn't move in their own firebase. Tell me what you need, he said. 45 seconds of suppression on the ridge concentrated on positions 1 and 2, she said. Everything you've got. I don't need it to be accurate. I need it to be loud and constant for 45 seconds. Marcus got on the radio. All stations, this is Cole. On my mark, maximum suppression positions 1 and 2 on the eastern ridge. Everything you have, 45 seconds, continuous. Mark in 10, 9, 8. He watched the north corner of the firebase. He watched Emily begin to move from the base of the observation tower. 7, 6, 5. She was moving fast. Not the fluid economy of motion from before. Fast. Because fast was what 45 seconds required. 4, 3, 2, 1, mark. Bravo Company opened up. The noise was extraordinary. Every weapon the firebase had directed at positions 1 and 2, creating a volume of fire that wasn't designed to kill but to fill the air with enough threat that anyone on the receiving end kept their head down and their weapon silent. Emily ran. Marcus watched her and said nothing over the radio because there was nothing to say, and anything he said would distract someone who needed everything they had right now to do what she was doing. She reached the water structure at 0241. She went up the side of it the way someone goes up something they have already calculated how to climb, finding the handholds without searching for them, pulling up with the rifle across her back, and in 11 seconds she was on top of it. Cease suppression, Marcus said. The firebase quieted back down to the normal level of an active firefight, which was still very loud but organized. Emily's voice on the radio. I've got position 4. And then less than 10 seconds later, the rifle cracked from the north corner. Position 4 went silent. On the platform, Whitaker heard the shot and looked toward the north corner and understood what had happened, what she had done to get that angle. And his jaw tightened with something that was not quite professional, admiration and not quite something more personal, but lived in the territory between them. Cold Whitaker said on the radio, Position 5 is shifting. They're trying to compensate again. They're going to figure out where she is. Emily, Position 5 is adapting, Marcus said. They may have your location. I see it, she said. Give me a moment. You don't have a moment, Whitaker said. They're adjusting now. Marcus heard it in Whitaker's voice, the thing he felt too. The water structure was exposed. She had known it was exposed. She had done it anyway because it was the position that gave her Position 4, and Position 4 was what the eastern sector needed. And now Position 5 was finding her. Emily, Marcus said, get off that structure. One more shot, she said. Emily. The rifle cracked. Position 5 went silent. And then the crack of incoming fire hit the north corner of the firebase, and Marcus Cole's heart stopped for exactly 1 second. Emily, report. Silence. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. I'm down from the structure, her voice came back. Slightly different than before. Something in it. Are you hit? A pause. Negative, she said. I'm clear. Marcus exhaled. Later, he would find out that the incoming round had hit the water structure at the exact point she had been lying on it, that the concrete had taken the impact 4 inches from where her body had been, and that the reason she had survived was that she had already begun to move before the round hit, because she had calculated from the adjustment she saw in Position 5's firing angle exactly where the return fire was going to land. 11 years, 9 deployments. This was what they built. At 0253, the ridge fire had reduced from 6 active positions to 2, and those 2 were under consistent engagement from Whitaker on the platform. The eastern sector had been recovered. The wounded had been extracted. The barrier was holding. And then Captain Walker's voice came over the radio from the command room. Cole, I've lost the backup communication channel. Marcus stopped. Say again. The backup is down. The antenna damage from the second explosion was worse than we assessed. I cannot reach the support assets. The sentence landed in the middle of everything else and sat there. No communication to the support assets. Assets that were 22 minutes out on a good channel. Assets that without a direct communication link had no activation signal, no grid reference, no call for support. 22 minutes of response time meant nothing if you couldn't reach them. Bravo Company, which had been fighting for 34 minutes, had 2 enemy positions still active on the ridge, a firebase with damaged barriers, 2 wounded soldiers, a commanding officer who was bleeding through a field dressing and running out of backup systems, and no way to call for the support that had been repositioned, approved, and was sitting at a standby location 22 minutes away. Marcus stood in the middle of the firebase and did the math. The math was bad. Walker, he said, options. I'm working it, Walker said, but I need time. How much time? I don't know, Walker said. And for the first time in 3 days, Marcus heard something in Walker's voice that wasn't steadiness. Marcus keyed his radio. Emily, Walker's lost communication with support assets. Both channels. He needs a working link. The radio was quiet for 4 seconds. Then she said, the targeting system in the observation tower. Is it intact? Marcus looked toward the tower. Whitaker, he said, targeting system in the tower, status. Whitaker's voice came back after a 3-second pause that felt much longer. The system is intact, but the power feed was damaged in the antenna hit. It's operational but not connected. The targeting system has an independent satellite uplink, Emily said. It doesn't use the communication array. It has a direct data channel to coordinating assets. Silence. If the power feed is restored, she said, The targeting system can establish a data link to the support assets. It's not voice communication, it's data, but it can transmit grid references and activation codes. Marcus looked at the tower with the damaged antenna, the tower with the observation platform where Whitaker was currently engaged on the two remaining ridge positions, the tower with the loose fourth rung, and the secondary exit Emily had insisted on the previous afternoon. Who's working the targeting system? Marcus said. I am, Emily said. You're not in the tower, he said. I can be, she said. The two remaining positions on the ridge are Whitaker's, she said. He's got them. Let him work. Marcus ran the options. He ran them fast, and he ran them again, and he came up with the same answer both times, which was that there was only one person in this Firebase who had the technical knowledge to operate a military targeting system under these specific conditions, combined with the operational knowledge to know what to do with it once it was working. That person was the woman he had told to stay away from combat 3 days ago. How long to restore the power feed and establish the data link, he said. If someone can get me to the base of the tower with tools, I'll need the power feed reconnected from outside the tower. Then I go up to the system. 12 minutes. Maybe less. Maybe more, he said. Maybe more, she said. Marcus made the decision. Okafor, he said, take the engineering kit from the supply room and get to Emily's position. Both of you move to the base of the observation tower. Do it now. Roger, Okafor said. Marcus moved to a position where he could provide coverage for the tower approach. At 0300 exactly. Emily Carter and Private Danny Okafor reached the base of the observation tower. The power feed reconnection took 8 minutes. Okafor on the outside with tools, Emily directing him with the precise patient voice of someone who knows exactly what needs to be done and understands that the person doing it needs clarity more than they need urgency. The secondary connector behind the main housing, she said. Red lead to the left terminal. Don't rush it. I'm not rushing, Okafor said. His hands were shaking slightly. He noticed that she noticed, and he made himself stop. Good hands, she said. You've got good hands, Danny. He connected the red lead. Now the ground, she said. He connected the ground. A small light on the base of the power housing went from red to green. That's it, she said. Good. Now get behind the barrier and stay there. She went up the ladder. In the dark on the fourth rung, her hand found the loose section by memory, and her weight shifted around it without pause. She was on the platform in 9 seconds. Whitaker was there, rifle up, engaged on the ridge. 2 positions still active, he said without looking away from the scope. I'm keeping them suppressed but not eliminated. They've gone to cover. Keep them there, she said. She moved to the targeting system on the far side of the platform. The green power light was on. She opened the interface and began working. Whitaker fired. She worked. He fired again. She worked. At 0311, the targeting system established its satellite data link. I've got the channel, she said. Walker, Marcus said on the radio. Emily has the data link on the targeting system. Walker's voice came back immediately. Say again. She's got the data link. She can transmit grid references and activation codes directly to the support assets. A 4-second pause from Walker. Tell her to send the package, Walker said. Authorization code follows. He read a 12-digit code. Emily entered it. She transmitted the grid references, the defensive situation summary, the request priority flag, the activation code. At 0313, the data channel returned a receipt confirmation. 22 minutes. 22 minutes from receipt confirmation to support asset arrival. On the ridge, the 2 remaining enemy positions were still active. Whitaker was holding them suppressed but not down, and Marcus could hear in the pattern of fire from the ridge that someone over there was making a decision. The loss of 4 positions, the continued resistance from the Firebase, the math of a coordinated assault that hadn't broken through. Someone on that ridge was doing the same calculation Marcus had done at 0253, and that calculation from their side pointed toward one thing: a final assault before the window closed. Emily, or Whitaker said, his voice had something in it. She looked up from the targeting system. She looked at the ridge. In the pre-dawn dark movement, real movement, not the disciplined, patient positioning of a prepared attack. Urgent movement, the kind that happens when a commander makes a decision and puts everything into one final push. They're moving, Whitaker said. I see it, she said. All remaining elements, he said. This is everything they have left. The radio crackled. Marcus's voice. Whitaker, status. They're committing, Whitaker said. Full remaining force, eastern approach. They're coming down the ridge. On the fire base below, Marcus Cole looked at his soldiers. He looked at the barrier. He looked at the two wounded men being tended by the medic. He looked at the eastern sector that had been recovered and held. Then he looked at the observation tower, where two people were doing two entirely different things, and both of them mattered absolutely. All stations, he said. His voice was level. This is Cole. They're coming. Hold your positions. Hold your sectors. Support is 22 minutes out. We hold for 22 minutes. He paused. We've held for 36 days, he said. We hold for 22 more minutes. On the platform, Emily heard his voice over the radio. She heard what was in it. She closed the targeting system interface. It was done. The transmission was sent. The receipt was confirmed. She stood up. She picked up the reel. Whitaker looked at her. Together, she said. Whitaker looked at the ridge, at the movement coming down the eastern face, at the firebase below them and the 30 soldiers who had been fighting for nearly an hour. Together, he said, and they fired. They fired together and the ridge answered back. The final assault came down the eastern face the way water comes down after a dam breaks. Not controlled, not patient. Everything the enemy had left committed in one direction in one push. Because whoever was commanding on that ridge had done the same math Marcus had done and arrived at the same conclusion from the opposite side. The window was closing. The fire base had not broken. The only remaining option was to overwhelm what was left before whatever was coming arrived and made the whole calculation irrelevant. 03:15, 22 minutes from receipt confirmation, 21 minutes remaining. Emily and Whitaker worked the platform with the specific economy of two professionals who have found their rhythm without negotiating it. She took the long shots, the ones that required the environmental compensation she had been calculating for 3 days. He took the closer engagements, the faster moving targets that required reaction speed over precision calculation. They didn't discuss it. They didn't divide it. It simply organized itself the way things organize themselves between two people who understand the same problem from different angles and trust each other's competence without having formally established that trust. Below the platform, Marcus Cole ran the firebase. He moved between sectors the way he had moved between them for 36 days, knowing every position, knowing every soldier, calling adjustments and corrections and encouragement in the flat, precise voice that soldiers recognize as the voice of someone who is not panicking and therefore gives them permission to not panic themselves. Sector 1, they're pushing left of your barrier. Adjust your angle. Okafor, I need eyes on the secondary approach. Get me something. Rodriguez, the wounded are clear. Get back to your position. Each instruction was given once and not repeated because the men of Bravo Company had been trained by Marcus Cole for 6 years across multiple deployments, and they understood the first time. Private Danny Okafor, behind the barrier on the northeastern corner, was doing something that surprised him. He was not afraid. He had been afraid in the first 60 seconds of the assault when the explosion hit the northern barrier and the machine gun opened up, and the world became noise and smoke, and the specific disorientation of a person who has trained for something and is now experiencing it rather than training for it. He had been afraid then, but somewhere in the 40 minutes since, the fear had converted itself into something else, something focused and purposeful that used the fear's energy without being controlled by the fear's content. He was aware in some back part of his mind that this conversion was what Marcus Cole had been trying to teach him for 7 months. He just hadn't understood it until this moment. He fired at movement on the eastern approach. He breathed. He fired again. Up on the platform, Emily tracked the assault commander. She had been looking for him since the assault began. Every coordinated attack has human architecture. Someone making decisions, someone shifting elements, calling adjustments, managing the push. You could see it in the pattern of the attack the same way you could see intention in a person's eyes. The movements weren't random. They were responsive, adaptive, directed by someone who was watching the same battlefield she was watching, but from the other side. She had found the pattern 12 minutes into the assault, and she had been tracking it since. At 03:17, she found the man himself. It was positioned on a secondary ridge, outcropping slightly north of the main attack axis, elevated enough to observe the full battlefield, communicating to the assault elements through the same brief signal protocol Tara Kim had been monitoring. He was smart. He had kept himself out of the primary engagement zone and was directing from a position that required a shot at an unusual angle across the ridgefold, at a distance that pushed 800 meters and required compensation for both the elevation differential and the lateral wind pattern that shifted in the space between the two ridge faces. It was a hard shot. Emily had made harder ones. But before she could take it, Whitaker's radio crackled. "Whitaker," Tara Kim's voice from the intelligence monitoring station inside the main building. "I'm reading a new signal pattern, different frequency. It's not the check-in protocol. It's something I haven't seen before." Whitaker passed it to Emily without being asked. She processed it. "It's a secondary coordination signal," she said. She kept her eye on the scope. "He's not just directing the assault. He's communicating with someone outside this valley." Whitaker looked at her. "A second element," he said, "or a command channel," she said. "He's reporting status to someone above him." "Which means," Whitaker said slowly, "which means this assault is part of something larger," she said. "This firebase is not the only objective. It's a pressure point. Someone above him wants to know how much resistance is here." Whitaker was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. Then he said, "Tara, can you record the signal pattern and get it to Walker?" "Already recording," Tara said. "Get it to Walker now," Emily said. "The support assets need to know there's a larger operational picture. The grid references I transmitted were for our location. If there are secondary objectives in this valley, Command needs to know before they arrive." At 0319, Tara Kim transmitted the recorded signal data through the targeting systems data channel. Emily had left the channel open precisely because she had learned over 11 years that the information you gather in the middle of a fight is sometimes more important than the fight itself. This was why she was here, not just to survive the assault, to understand what the assault meant. Marcus came over the radio at 0320. "Emily, how are you and Whitaker holding on ammunition?" She checked without taking her eye from the scope. 60%, she said. "I need 20 minutes, he said. "We are 20 minutes from support. Hold that platform." "Copy," she said. 20 minutes. 19 now. The assault pressed harder. The enemy commander on the secondary outcropping had recognized that the firebase's resistance was not breaking, and he had one tool left to apply, which was mass. What remained of his assault force, 6 or 7 fighters, on the eastern approach, he pushed all of them directly at the eastern barrier simultaneously, a tactic that accepted casualties in exchange for momentum. Marcus saw it coming from his position and made a call he hated making. "All available personnel eastern barrier, now." It stripped 3 soldiers from secondary positions to reinforce the primary point of pressure. It was the right call. It was also the call that left the secondary approach to the north with a single soldier watching it, Private Danny Okafor. Okafor heard the order. He heard the 3 soldiers near him peel off toward the eastern barrier. He looked at the northern approach, at the darkness beyond the perimeter that his rifle was covering, and he made a decision that Marcus Cole had not ordered, but that Marcus Cole, when he heard about it later, would recognize as the decision of a soldier who had learned the right lesson. Okafor stayed. He stayed on the north corner alone, and he covered his sector because someone had to cover it, and he was the someone who was there. At 0322, the eastern barrier assault reached its peak pressure. 4 of Bravo Company's soldiers were at the barrier engaging directly. Marcus was 10 meters behind them, coordinating, reading the assault, watching for the moment when it either broke or got through. The noise was total. The smoke was everywhere. The barrier, which Emily had recommended moving 12 meters east 40 hours ago, was doing exactly what that adjustment had been designed to make it do. It was holding, but barely. And then Marcus heard something that didn't belong. Not from the eastern barrier, from behind him, from the direction of the main building, a sound that was too close. He spun. 2 fighters had come through the damaged section of the northern perimeter, the section that had taken the initial explosion in the first minutes of the assault, the section that had been on the secondary position watch list, but had not been a primary concern because the assault had driven all attention eastward. They were inside the perimeter. They were moving toward the command room, where Captain Walker was. Marcus Cole made the calculation in less than a second. He was 30 meters from the command room. He had 2 soldiers between him and the command room, both of them engaged at the eastern barrier and unaware of the breach. The 2 fighters were 20 meters from the command room door and moving. He ran. He hit the radio while running. Breach north perimeter, 2 elements moving on command room, all available. I was through the door before he finished the sentence. Walker was at the radio. The medic specialist Cook was beside him. Walker had a sidearm in his hand that Cook had apparently helped him reach because Walker's shrapnel arm had limited mobility. He had heard the radio call. He was standing bleeding through the field dressing with a look on his face that Marcus had never seen there before and never wanted to see again. The first fighter came through the door. What happened in the next 45 seconds was something Marcus Cole would not describe in detail to anyone who hadn't been in a room when something like this happened, because the details weren't the point, and the point wasn't something that translated into detail. The point was that he was there, and Walker was there, and Cook was there, and the 2 men who had come through the north perimeter breach did not leave the command room under their own power. Marcus stood afterward in the command room doorway. He was breathing. Walker was behind him, still on the radio. Cook was doing something efficient in medical. Marcus looked at his hands. Then he heard Emily's voice in his earpiece. Marcus, the commander on the secondary outcropping, is preparing to move. He's been managing this from distance, but I think he just understood that it's not going to work. He's going to try to extract. Marcus put everything that had just happened in the command room in the place in his mind where things go when they have to wait, and he keyed the radio. Can you take him? He said. Yes, she said, but I need him still for 2 seconds. He's moving along the ridge. How long? He'll stop when he reaches the extraction point, she said. Give me 30 seconds. Marcus stood in the command room doorway and gave her 30 seconds. He counted them. At second 28, the rifle cracked from the platform. At 0329, the directional signal from the secondary outcropping went silent. Tarakim's voice came immediately. Signal terminated. Marcus exhaled. Good shot, he said on the radio. It wasn't a hard shot, Emily said. And something in her voice when she said it, not pride, not satisfaction, just a clean factual accounting of the truth, made Marcus close his eyes for exactly 1 second. 11 years, 9 deployments. This was what they built. At 0331, without the direction of the commander on the secondary outcropping, the assault on the eastern barrier faltered. Not immediately, not all at once. The fighters pressing the barrier continued for 90 seconds before the absence of command coherence became apparent in the pattern of their movement. Then it began to dissolve the way a coordinated thing dissolves when the coordination is removed, individual elements making individual decisions, pulling back. Breaking contact, the assault that had been a unified push becoming a collection of separate retreats. Marcus was back at the barrier. He watched it happen. He had watched assaults dissolve before. It always looked the same. The moment when the human architecture of an attack collapsed and what was left was just people trying to survive. He didn't pursue. He held the line. All stations hold positions, he said. Do not pursue. Hold your sectors. The eastern barrier had survived. At 0335, Private Danny Okafor's voice came over the radio from the north corner. Cole, north corner. I've got 2 people down on my side and I've been alone up here for 8 minutes, but the approach is clear. Just wanted you to know. Marcus put his hand over his eyes for 1 second. Good work, Okafor, he said. Stay there, relief is coming. He sent Rodriguez to the north corner. Then he stood in the middle of the firebase in the specific quiet of a firefight that has reached its turning point, and he took stock of what he had. 2 wounded in Sector 2. Hendricks and Santos both stable, both in the medic's care. Walker in the command room, shrapnel in the arm, still on the radio, still bleeding and still working. The medic treating 3 additional soldiers with minor wounds from shrapnel and debris. The eastern barrier damaged but standing. The north perimeter breach sealed by Marcus and Walker in the command room. The communication link to support assets established and active through the targeting system data channel. And on the observation platform, 2 people who had been working for 76 minutes straight without stopping. Marcus climbed the observation ladder. He found the 4th rung by memory. He came up onto the platform and found Emily and Whitaker in the same positions they had been in when he last saw them, but different. The specific exhaustion of people who have been running on the reserves beyond their reserves and are now beginning to feel it as the immediate urgency decreases. Whitaker's hands were steady. His eyes were still scanning, but his shoulders had come down a fraction from where they had been at the height of the assault. Emily was sitting with a rifle across her knees. Her posture was straight. Her breathing was controlled. But her face had something on it that Marcus had not seen there before. Not fear, not exhaustion exactly. The thing that comes after, the after state of someone who has done something that took everything they had and is now on the other side of it and doesn't quite know what to do with themselves. Marcus sat down beside her. Not beside her, the way an officer sits beside a subordinate. Beside her, the way one person sits beside another person when they have both been through the same thing and the thing is almost over. 14 minutes, he said. She nodded. How are you? He said. She looked at him. I'll tell you when it's over, she said. He almost smiled. That's what everyone says. She actually smiled. Small, real. 14 minutes, she said. We hold for 14 minutes. Below them, the firebase was settling into the controlled, watchful quiet of a position that has repelled an assault and is waiting to confirm that the repulsion is complete. Soldiers moving between positions. Ammunition being redistributed. The medic moving between the wounded with the specific focused competence of someone who has been needed and has met the need. At 0339, Tara Kim came over the radio. I'm reading signal activity from the ridge. It's different from anything I've tracked tonight. The pattern is, she paused. It's a withdrawal signal. I've seen this once before in training materials. It's a coordinated pullback order. Marcus sat up. They're withdrawing, he said. Signal pattern is consistent with it, Tara said. Whitaker lowered the rifle. Emily looked at Marcus. Their commander is down, she said. The assault failed to break through. Support is incoming. Someone up the chain made the calculation. They're cutting losses, Marcus said. Yes, she said. Marcus keyed the radio. All stations, this is Cole. Possible enemy withdrawal in progress. Do not pursue. Maintain positions. Eyes open. This may be a feint. He had been burned by that before. An apparent withdrawal that was actually a repositioning. He was not going to lose anyone in the last 12 minutes because he assumed the math was done when the math might not be done. But at 0343, the ridge went quiet. Not the quiet of suppressed positions waiting to re-engage. The deep quiet of empty positions. The silence that has a different quality than the silence of things hiding. Tara's voice. Signal activity has ceased. All frequencies. Cole, I think they're gone. The radio was quiet for a moment. Then Marcus said, all stations. Maintain positions. Support assets are 9 minutes out. We hold what we have. Nobody moves, nobody relaxes, nobody assumes anything. 9 minutes. He looked at Emily. She was looking at the ridge. It's over, she said quietly, not announcing it, just saying what she felt. 9 minutes, he said. Yes, she said. 9 minutes. At 0344, Whitaker put the rifle down on the platform railing and sat down against the railing and looked at the sky, which was beginning to show the very first gray edge of pre-dawn. He looked at it for a moment without saying anything. Then he said, I recalibrated my zero. Emily looked at him. You were right about the pressure differential, he said. I should have caught that myself. You caught it when it mattered, she said. Because you told me, he said. Because you listened, she said. That's on you, not me. Whitaker was quiet for a moment. Who taught you, he said. The long-range stuff, the environmental compensation, all of it. Emily looked at the ridge. A man named Fletcher, she said. Sergeant Major Harold Fletcher. He's been retired for 6 years. He any good? The best I ever saw, she said, until I got better. She said it without arrogance, just the plain accounting of a fact. Whitaker heard it the right way. I want to be better, he said. You already are, she said. You just don't know it yet. At 0346, Marcus got off the platform and went to check on Walker. He found Walker in the command room, still at the radio arm, in a proper sling. Now that Cook had enforced skin a shade paler than normal from blood loss voice, absolutely steady. Support assets are 7 minutes out, Walker said when Marcus walked in. Air assets are behind them by 4 minutes. I've been coordinating approach routes for the last 8 minutes. Marcus looked at him. Sir, how is the arm? Functional, Walker said. Cook's assessment. Walker looked at Cook. Cook said he needs surgery. He's going to need it in the next few hours, but he's stable. Walker looked back at Marcus. 7 minutes. 7 minutes, Marcus confirmed. He looked at the command room, at the evidence of what had happened there 17 minutes ago. He looked at Walker, who was also looking at it and who was doing what Marcus was doing, which was filing it in the place where things go when they have to wait. She called it, Walker said quietly. 3 weeks ago, she had the whole picture, the pre-positioning, the timeline, the objective, all of it. She had most of it, Marcus said. She needed direct observation for the rest. The rock face, Walker said. Color variation, too precise, Marcus said. She saw it on the first morning. Walker shook his head slowly. I owe command an interesting report, he said. Yes, sir, Marcus said. You do. And I owe her something more than a report, Walker said. She'll tell you that you don't, Marcus said. I know, Walker said, which is exactly why I do. At 0350, the sound changed. It started as something that was almost indistinguishable from the mountain wind, a low rhythmic pressure in the air that built from the edge of perception to something undeniable over about 45 seconds. Then it resolved into the distinct rotary sound of military helicopters approaching at speed, and Marcus Cole stood in the open area of the firebase with his face turned toward the sound and felt something move through him that had nothing to do with military bearing and everything to do with being human and having come through something. The soldiers who could hear it started to react. Not celebration, not yet, something more contained than that. The specific release that comes when the thing you have been holding on through is finally held on through. Rodriguez put one hand against the barrier and pressed his forehead against his forearm for 3 seconds. Okafor stood up straight on the north corner and looked at the sky. Cook in the medical space didn't stop what he was doing, but said something quiet that nobody heard. But Whitaker came down from the platform. He stood beside Marcus. They both looked at the sky. She's still up there, Whitaker said. Marcus looked up at the platform. Emily was standing at the railing, looking toward the sound of the incoming helicopters. The rifle was not in her hands. She had set it down. He realized the moment the withdrawal was confirmed, and she had not picked it back up. Her hands were at her sides. She was watching the helicopters come in. Marcus climbed back up the ladder. He found the 4th rung. He came up onto the platform beside her. She didn't look at him. She was watching the helicopters, which were visible now, moving fast and low, exactly the way the helicopter had moved when it brought her to this firebase 3 days ago. Low and fast. This time it meant something entirely different. You should be down there, he said. In a minute, she said. He stood beside her and watched the helicopters come in. After a moment, he said, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me straight. Go ahead, she said. The target you engaged on the secondary outcropping, he said. The commander. The signal went silent immediately. Tara confirmed it. Yes, she said. That shot, he said. That was what you came here for. She was quiet for 3 seconds. The intelligence gathered tonight, she said. The signal data Tara recorded the secondary coordination channel, the confirmation of a larger operational picture. That's what I came here for. That information goes up the chain tonight, and it changes what happens in this corridor for the next 6 months. But the shot, Marcus said. She looked at him. The shot was part of it, she said. Yes. He held her gaze. You knew, he said. When you arrived, you knew it was going to come to this. I knew it might, she said. I didn't know it would. That's why the cover, he said, not just to move freely, to observe without being a target yourself until the moment required it. She looked back at the helicopters. If the assault commander had known what I was when I arrived, she said the timeline would have accelerated. They would have committed before I had completed the observation. Before Tara had the monitoring equipment positioned, before the support asset repositioning was complete. She paused. The cover wasn't to deceive your soldiers, Marcus. It was to give us all the best possible chance. The helicopters were close now. Marcus looked at the ridge, quiet and empty in the first gray light of the coming dawn. He looked at this firebase below him, his soldiers, his people, all of them present and accounted for in the weight of that particular accounting was something he carried in his chest without knowing exactly where to put it. 30 men, he said quietly. All of them. All of them, she said. He looked at her. She looked back at him. And in the growing gray light of the morning, in the first helicopter downdraft that began to blow dust across the firebase, something settled in his face that had not been there 3 days ago. Not admiration exactly, though that was part of it. Something more specific. The particular thing that happens when a person you have misjudged reveals themselves to be so far beyond your judgment that the misjudgment itself becomes a kind of education. The first helicopter touched down. Marcus put his hand on the platform railing. Come on, he said. Let's get Walker to a surgeon. She picked up the rifle. She carried it down the ladder with the same deliberate care she had carried everything in this firebase. The notebooks, the maps, the manila folder, the weight of 11 years and 9 deployments in a mission that had looked like rocks and turned out to be everything. She found the fourth rung in the growing light. Her weight shifted around it without hesitation. She stepped off the ladder and onto the ground. And for the first time since she had arrived at Firebase Kestrel, Emily Carter stood in the open center of the compound, in the noise and wind of the incoming helicopters, with nowhere she needed to be, except exactly here in the aftermath of a night that had taken everything and given it all back. The first helicopter touched down at 0352, and everything that followed happened with the organized efficiency of a military machine that had been waiting 22 minutes to move and was now moving all at once. Medical personnel came off the second helicopter before the rotors had fully slowed. They went directly to Walker, who was still arguing with Cook about whether he needed to be carried or could walk, and the argument was settled in favor of carried by the simple fact that his legs decided to disagree with his intentions the moment he stood up from the radio. He went down onto one knee and caught himself on the table with his good arm, and Cook was there immediately. And then the incoming medics were there, and Walker looked at the ceiling for one moment with an expression that Marcus recognized as the expression of a man who has held himself together through an act of pure will and is now allowing the will to rest because the people who need to take over have arrived. Marcus stood at the command room door and watched them work on Walker. Walker looked at him from the stretcher. "Report," Walker said. "Firebase secured," Marcus said. "Eastern assault repelled. Enemy withdrawal confirmed at 0343. 2 soldiers requiring medical evacuation. 3 additional with minor wounds, no fatalities." He paused on that last one. He said it again in his head to make sure it was real. "No fatalities, sir." Walker closed his eyes for exactly 3 seconds. Then he opened them. "The signal data Tara captured," he said. "Already transmitted through the targeting system channel," Marcus said. "Emily sent the full package before the support assets arrived." Walker nodded slowly. "Good, that's good." He looked at the ceiling again. "Tell her that's good." "Tell her yourself, sir," Marcus said. "You'll have the chance." They took Walker out on the stretcher, and Marcus stood in the empty command room for a moment after they left. The room that had seen 3 days of planning and 1 night of everything, and was now quiet in the way rooms get quiet after the people have moved through them and taken all of their urgency with them. He looked at the survey maps still spread on the table, Emily's manila folder still there, still squared with the edge of the table. He looked at where she had pressed her palm flat on that table the first night in the particular grounded gesture that he now understood was not nervous habit, but professional discipline. The act of a person who stays connected to the physical world around them when everything inside that world is trying to become abstract and chaotic. He picked up the manila folder. He carried it outside to find her. Emily was standing near the second helicopter, speaking with the senior officer who had come in with the support assets, a full colonel named Briggs who Marcus did not know personally but recognized by the kind of authority he carried, which was the kind that doesn't need to announce itself. They were speaking quietly. Briggs was listening more than talking, which was its own kind of information about what he thought of what she was saying. Marcus didn't interrupt. He stood back and watched his soldiers interact with the incoming personnel. The handoffs, the debriefs, the organized processing of a firefight's aftermath. He watched Rodriguez help carry Santos to the medevac helicopter, one hand on the stretcher and one hand on Santos's arm, talking to him the whole way. He watched Whitaker stand with 2 of the incoming support soldiers and explain the ridge positions with the flat, accurate language of someone who had been looking at those positions through a scope for the past hour and a half. He watched Danny Okafor sit down against the north barrier alone for a moment and put his hands on his knees and look at the ground. Marcus went to Okafor. He sat down beside him, not beside him the way a sergeant sits beside a private, but the way Marcus had sat beside Emily on the platform, the way one person sits beside another person after something. Okafor didn't look up. 7 months, Okafor said. "I've been here 7 months, and I always wondered if I'd do the right thing when it actually happened." "And," Marcus said. Okafor looked up. "I stayed," he said, "north corner. Alone, 8 minutes. I stayed." "You did," Marcus said. "I didn't decide to stay," Okafor said. "I just stayed, like it wasn't even a decision." Marcus looked at him. "That's what 7 months of training does," he said. "It makes the right thing the automatic thing. You don't decide it. You just do it." He paused. That's what you've been building toward since you got here. Tonight you found out it worked. Okafor was quiet for a moment. She told me I had good hands, he said. When I was reconnecting the power feed on the tower, I was shaking and she told me I had good hands. You do have good hands, Marcus said. She could have said, hurry up, Okafor said. She could have told me to move faster. We needed that link up and I was shaking. She told me I had good hands. Marcus looked across the firebase toward where Emily was still speaking with Colonel Briggs. Yeah, he said quietly. That's who she is. At 04:15, Colonel Briggs gathered the senior personnel for an initial debrief inside the main building. Marcus, Tara, Kim Whitaker, and Emily around the table in the command room that had been a planning space and a combat space and was now returning to being a command space. Briggs stood at the head of the table and he did not have a notepad or a tablet. He was the kind of officer who remembered everything, and the kind who made you aware he was remembering everything by the quality of his attention. Walk me through it from the beginning, he said. All of it. Marcus started talking. He went through it in order the way you brief when you want someone to understand not just what happened, but why each thing happened. The arrival, the Eastern Ridge observation, the signal pattern, the revised timeline, the communication breakdown, the assault, the targeting system data link, the signal data Tara captured. He spoke for 11 minutes without stopping. When he finished, Briggs looked at Emily. Major Carter, he said. Everyone in the room heard it. Not Ms. Carter, not Emily Carter, civilian specialist. Major Carter. Tara Kim's eyes moved to Emily's face. Whitaker went very still. Marcus watched at the table. Emily looked at Briggs steadily. Sir, she said. The signal data you captured and transmitted, Briggs said. Command has been working on it since it arrived. I want you to know that what you sent up isn't just a record of tonight's assault. It's a thread, a coordination pattern that connects to two other active situations in this corridor that we have been unable to fully map for 8 weeks. He paused. Tonight you found the connection. The room was very quiet. What does that mean operationally? Emily asked. It means the larger picture you suspected exists, Briggs said, and now we have enough of it to act on. He looked at her with the specific directness of someone delivering information that he knows carries weight. The mission you came here to complete, Major, you completed it. Emily Carter sat at the table in the command room of Firebase Kestrel and held the colonel's gaze and said nothing for a moment. Not because she had nothing to say, but because some things, when they finally arrive, need a second of silence around them before words are allowed back in. My team, she said. Bravo Company is cited in the operational record, Briggs said. All of them, by name. Emily looked at Marcus. He looked back at her. Something passed between them that had no military category and didn't need one. At 0437, Briggs stepped outside to handle additional communications, and the 5 people left in the command room existed for a moment in the specific, suspended quiet of people who have been through something together and are only beginning to understand the full shape of what they've been through. Tara Kim spoke first. Major, she said, just the word, testing how it sat. Emily looked at her. I should have told you, Emily said, not defensively, just plainly. I understand if that's a problem. Tara thought about it for a moment, really thought about it the way Tara did everything systematically and honestly. The signal monitoring, Tara said. You knew what I was looking for before I found it. I had an idea, Emily said. You knew the check-in protocol from the first time I described it, Tara said. You identified it as a coordination pattern in under 2 minutes. Yes, Emily said, but you let me find it, Tara said. You didn't just tell me what it was. Emily was quiet. You needed to own that analysis, Emily said. If I handed you the answer, you'd have my conclusion. If you found it yourself, you'd have your own understanding of it. Those are different things. Tara Kim sat with that. Then she said, the secondary signal, the coordination channel. I recorded it because you told Whitaker to tell me to record it in the middle of the firefight. Yes, Emily said. How did you know it was significant? Because the timing of it was wrong for a tactical signal, Emily said. Tactical coordination happens before and during the assault, not midway through when the assault is already in trouble. A commander who is signaling mid-assault when his positions are being eliminated isn't coordinating his own attack. He's reporting to someone above him. Tara stared at her. That's what I do, Emily said simply. I read patterns. For 11 years, Whitaker said from across the table. Emily looked at him. Give or take, she said. Whitaker put both hands flat on the table. The shot at the water structure, he said. Position 5 was adjusting on your location. I told you they were adjusting. You said, give me a moment. I said, you don't have a moment. I know, she said. You took the shot anyway, he said. Yes, she said. And then you moved, he said, before the return fire hit. Yes, she said. He looked at her steadily. You calculated where the return fire was going to land before they fired it. Based on their adjustment angle, she said. If you know where someone is aiming before they shoot you, know where not to be when they shoot. Whitaker shook his head slowly, not in disbelief, in the specific recognition of someone who is very good at a thing and has just been shown what very good looks like from 2 levels above where they currently stand. Sergeant Major Fletcher, he said, the man who taught you, is he contactable? He runs a program for junior marksmen at Fort Bragg, she said. He's hard to reach, but not impossible. I'd like his contact, Whitaker said. I'll give it to you before I leave, she said. Marcus, who had been quiet through the debrief, watching the room, the way he watched everything with the complete attention of a man who understands that the people around him are the most important data he will ever collect, spoke then. Before you leave, he said. When is that? Emily looked at him. Today, she said. The word landed in the room with a weight that surprised Marcus, which itself surprised him because he was not a man who was easily surprised by the weight of words. Today, he repeated, the operational picture that opened up from tonight's data requires immediate follow-on action, she said. I need to be where that action is being coordinated. Of course, he said. They looked at each other. Marcus, she said. It was the second time she had used his first name. He had filed the first time. He filed this one too in the same place, which was a place that didn't have a military label on it. I know, he said, before she could say whatever she was going to say. You did your job. We all did ours. That's the whole story. She shook her head very slightly. That's not what I was going to say, she said. He waited. I was going to say thank you, she said, for the perimeter walk. At 0200 on the second night, you didn't have to sit with me on that platform. You could have gone back to your quarters. You came up there because something felt wrong and you needed to understand it. She paused. That instinct is what kept your people alive as much as anything I did. Don't forget that. Marcus Cole, who had been in combat 7 times and had been thanked in various ways by various people for various things, sat in the command room of Firebase Kestrel at 0440 in the morning and felt the thank you from Emily Carter land, somewhere that thank yous did not usually reach. He didn't know what to say. So he said the thing that was true. You gave me 30 men, he said. All of them. I'll remember that for the rest of my life. The debrief ended at 0500. The medevac helicopters departed at 0512, with Walker, Santos, and Hendricks, all 3 of them, stable. All 3 of them present and alive in a way that was not guaranteed 9 hours ago. Walker on the stretcher looked at Marcus before they loaded him and said 2 words, good work. And Marcus had nodded once the same way he had nodded at Emily on the first day, but entirely different in every way that mattered. The support personnel began their systematic assessment of the firebase at 0520. Engineer checking the barrier damage. Intelligence personnel downloading the targeting system data log. Medical personnel making a final assessment of the 3 soldiers with minor wounds, all of whom were cleared for duty with appropriate treatment. At 0530, as the first genuine light of the morning came over the eastern mountains and the ridge that had been a shadow and a threat for 3 days became visible in the actual light of day, Marcus Cole climbed the observation ladder one more time. He found the 4th rung by feel. He came up onto the platform. He stood at the railing and looked at the eastern ridge in the morning light, and he looked for the rock face that Emily had identified on the first morning, the section where the color variation meant something that natural erosion didn't explain, where the cuts were too precise. He could see it now clearly in the morning light. He could not believe he hadn't seen it before she pointed it out. He could not believe he had looked at that ridge every morning for 36 days and seen only a ridge. He heard her on the ladder behind him. She came up onto the platform and stood beside him at the railing. They both looked at the ridge. I can see it now, he said. The rock face, the color variation. You were looking at the whole ridge, she said. I was looking for one specific thing. That's the difference. Not ability, focus. Is that something you're born with, he said, or something you learn? Both, she said. The capacity is born, the application is learned, Over a long time with a lot of failure. She paused. I was not good at this when I started. I was trained by the best and I failed constantly for 2 years before anything clicked. He looked at her. That's not what I expected you to say, he said. What did you expect? That you were always exactly this, he said. She almost laughed. It was the closest he had seen her come to it, a breath of something that had the shape of a laugh without quite becoming one. Nobody is always exactly what they become, she said. Fletcher failed me on 3 consecutive qualification assessments. He told me I thought too fast, that I was trying to outrun the shot instead of inhabiting it. She looked at the ridge. I had to learn to be still inside the noise. That took the longest. Be still inside the noise, Marcus repeated. It's applicable to more than marksmanship, she said. I thought about Walker on the radio bleeding through a field dressing voice, absolutely steady. He thought about Okafor on the north corner, alone for 8 minutes staying because staying was the right thing and the training had made it automatic. He thought about Whitaker recalibrating his zero after a conversation that had maybe 15 minutes because he was a professional who recognized good information and used it without ego. I thought about himself at 0219 running toward the command room and not stopping, still inside the noise. I need to tell you something, Marcus said, and I need you to let me finish before you tell me I don't owe you anything. She looked at him. I was wrong about you from the moment you stepped off that helicopter, he said. Not just in the practical sense, in the deeper sense. I looked at you and I decided what you were before I knew anything. I decided what you couldn't do based on what you look like and how you arrived and what your paperwork said. He paused. I've made that mistake before in smaller ways. I've never made it at that cost before. 30 men almost paid for my assumption. Emily was quiet. 30 men didn't pay for it, she said. Because you were better than my assumption, he said, not because my assumption wasn't dangerous. She looked at him for a long moment. You adjusted, she said. The moment the information changed, you adjusted. You came to me at 0200 because your instincts told you something was wrong and you needed to understand it. You authorized my engagement on position 3 without hesitation when it needed to happen. You made the call on the water structure, knowing the risk, and you covered my movement. She paused. A man who was truly wrong about me wouldn't have done any of those things. A man who was wrong and couldn't adjust would have gotten people killed. You got people home. Marcus looked at the ridge. I'm going to remember this deployment differently than any other, he said. Not because of the firefight, because of what I learned about what I didn't know. That's the best kind of learning, she said. The kind that costs something. The kind you can't unknow. At 0600, Colonel Briggs informed Emily that her transport was ready. She had 30 minutes. She spent 12 of them with Tara Kim going over the signal data analysis in detail, walking Tara through the interpretation methodology she had used, and ensuring that Tara had the full picture of what she had captured and why it mattered. Tara Kim, who was meticulous and quiet and very good at her job, took notes with the focused attention of someone who understands they are being taught something that will be useful for a long time. One more thing, Emily said before she left the monitoring station. Tara looked up. The irregular intervals, Emily said, the way the check-in protocol varied. You identified it as irregular in a very regular way. That description was exactly right. Don't let anyone tell you it was obvious. It wasn't obvious. It required a specific kind of pattern recognition that most people would have dismissed as background noise. Tara Kim held her gaze. How did you know to tell me that? Tara said. Because I know what it feels like to do something correctly and have someone else take the credit for making it look easy, Emily said. That won't happen to you in any report I write. Your name is attached to that capture. Tara Kim, who was not a person given to visible emotion in professional settings, looked at the monitoring equipment for a moment. Thank you, she said. Do good work, Emily said. You already are. She spent 8 minutes with James Whitaker. She gave him Fletcher's contact information, written on a page torn from the same notebook she had been filling since the first morning on the platform. She handed it to him with a second page that had in her precise handwriting a full set of calculations for the environmental compensation adjustments she had made during the engagement. Ballistic tables specific to this elevation, this atmospheric pressure, this temperature range. Whitaker looked at the pages. This is a week of work, he said. I did it over 3 mornings, she said. He looked up. You were doing this on the platform, he said. The small movements. I thought you were making observation notes. Both, she said. He folded the pages carefully and put them in his chest pocket. The shot at position 3, he said. 0233. First shot. Full silence on the machine gun immediately. Yes, she said. I've been trying to work out the geometry of that shot since it happened, he said. From that position on the platform, accounting for the angle, the distance, the wind conditions at that point in the night. I can work out how it was done. I just can't work out how it was done in under 4 seconds from the moment you picked up the scope. Emily looked at him. You've been working it out for an hour and a half, she said. I've been working it out for 3 days. Whitaker was quiet for a moment. Then he said, that's it, isn't it? It's not a faster calculation, it's a longer preparation. The shot is the last 5%, she said. Everything before the shot is the other 95. He put his hand on his chest pocket where the folded pages were. I'll contact Fletcher, he said. Tell him I sent you, she said. He'll work you harder than you think you need to be worked. Let him. She spent the remaining 10 minutes with Danny Okafor. She found him exactly where Marcus had found him, against the north barrier, sitting on the ground with his hands on his knees. He looked up when she came and started to stand the automatic response to someone in authority. Stay there, she said. She sat down beside him on the ground back against the barrier, the same way Marcus had sat beside her on the platform. Okafor settled back down. They sat for a moment. 7 months, she said. He looked at her. I know you said that to Cole, she said. I heard it. You hear everything, he said. Most things, she said. 7 months is not a long time in this profession. But tonight you made 7 months count like 6 years. He looked at his hands. I was scared, he said. I know, she said. On the north corner, alone, I was scared the whole time. I know, she said again. But I stayed, he said. You did, she said. And I want you to understand something about that, not the staying itself, what the staying means. She paused, choosing the words the way she chose everything, with precision and without waste. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's the decision made in the presence of fear that something else matters more. Tonight you decided that your sector mattered more than your fear, that your team mattered more. That's not a small thing, Danny. That's the whole thing. That's everything this job is built on. Okafor looked at the north perimeter. She trusted me, he said. Carter. When she told me to get the engineering kit and come to the tower, she didn't explain. She didn't check if I could do it. She just said go, and I went. Because she knew you could do it, Emily said. How he said. She'd known me for 3 days. Emily looked at him. Because I watched you for 3 days, she said. And what I saw was a person who asked the right questions, listened to the answers, and showed up early for things he didn't have to show up early for. She paused. The night you brought me coffee, you asked me why I was really here. He almost smiled. You told me to drink my coffee. You asked anyway, she said. That matters. The ones who keep asking even when they don't get answers are the ones you can trust when the answers matter. I was quiet for a moment. Are you really leaving today? He said. Yes, she said. Will you come back? She was quiet. This work doesn't usually bring me back to the same place twice, she said. But this corridor is going to be active for a long time. The information from tonight is going to generate operations for months. She looked at him. Our paths may cross again. This world is smaller than it looks. I hope they do, he said. She stood up. She looked down at him against the barrier in the morning light. Be still inside the noise, she said. He looked up at her. What does that mean? Ask Cole, she said. He'll know. She walked away across the firebase. At 0628, Marcus Cole found her at the transport helicopter with her backpack, her equipment case, and the manila folder. All of it exactly as it had arrived 3 days ago. The equipment case locked, the folder aligned. The backpack settled on one shoulder. She looked exactly as she had coming off the helicopter on the first day, and completely different in every way that mattered. He walked toward her, and she saw him coming and waited. He stopped in front of her. He had thought on the walk over about what he was going to say. He had rejected several things. He had decided finally to say the one thing that was true without any of the surrounding things that were also true but didn't need to be said. But what came out was not what he had decided. What came out was that fourth rung on the observation ladder, the loose one. You knew it was loose from the first time you went up in complete darkness on the first morning. She looked at him. Yes, she said. You navigated it every time he said, without hesitating, without mentioning it. It wasn't my ladder to fix, she said. No, he said. It was mine. He looked at the ground for 1 second and then back at her. I fixed it this morning, before the debrief. Took me 4 minutes. She looked at him. Why are you telling me that? She said. Because I should have fixed it 36 days ago, when the first man went to the medic, he said. I walked past that loose rung every day, and I knew it was there, and I didn't fix it because it wasn't causing a catastrophic problem. It was just a problem. He paused. I do that with more than ladders. Emily Carter stood at the door of the transport helicopter and looked at Marcus Cole in the morning light of the eastern mountains and understood what he was saying, all of it, the literal thing and the things beneath the literal thing. The first step to fixing something, she said, is deciding it's worth your time. You showed me that, he said, the way you watched this Firebase for 3 days before anyone understood what you were watching for. The way nothing was too small to look at carefully. He paused. I'm going to run this Firebase differently after today. Not just tactically, the way I look at things. She held his gaze. You were already doing it, she said. That's why 30 men came home this morning. He extended his hand. Not the way he had not extended it on the first day. This was the real thing, the direct, complete extension of one professional to another, with nothing held back and nothing performed. She took it. They shook hands. And in that handshake, everything that had happened in 3 days and 1 night was present. The mockery and the adjustment. The platform at 0200. The decision at position 3. The water structure. The fourth rung fixed this morning in 4 minutes, 36 days late. All of it. Major Carter, he said. Sergeant Cole, she said. She got on the helicopter. He stepped back. The rotors built from a slow turn to a full roar, and the downdraft pushed across the Firebase the same way it had pushed across it when she arrived, throwing dust in the particular smell of fuel and high mountain air that Marcus would associate for the rest of his life with this specific 36-hour period. He watched the helicopter lift. He watched it turn east. He watched it until it was a shape against the mountains, and then until the shape was gone, and then until the sound was gone, and then he stood in the silence of the Firebase at 0635 in the morning, with 30 men around him, all of them present and alive in the specific golden light of a day that had been earned. Private Danny Okafor appeared at his elbow. She's gone, Okafor said. She's gone, Marcus said. She told me to ask you something, Okafor said. Marcus looked at him. She said, ask Cole what it means to be still inside the noise. Marcus looked at the sky where the helicopter had been. I thought about a woman on an observation platform in complete darkness at 0322 in the morning, pressing her palm flat against the railing, listening to the mountains with the complete patient attention of someone who has learned that the thing you're looking for will reveal itself if you stay quiet enough and present enough and grounded enough to receive it. I thought about the moment before the first shot at position 3, the machine gun that had pinned his entire eastern sector for 14 minutes, the way Emily had not rushed, the way she had found inside the noise of an active firefight the stillness that the shot required, not by suppressing the urgency but by moving through it to something on the other side. He thought about Walker on the radio, bleeding through a field-dressing voice, steady, still transmitting. I thought about Okafor on the north corner, alone for 8 minutes, afraid the whole time staying because staying was the right thing. He thought about the fourth rung fixed this morning in 4 minutes. He thought about 30 men, all of them. It means, Marcus said slowly, that the noise is always going to be there. The chaos and the pressure and the fear and the doubt, that doesn't go away. You don't wait for it to go away. He looked at Okafor. You find the still place inside it, the part of you that knows what it's doing, and you operate from there. Okafor was quiet. Is that something you learned? He said. Yes, Marcus said. Over a long time, with a lot of failure. He paused. And sometimes, if you're lucky, someone shows you what it looks like when it's done right. He looked at the eastern ridge in the full morning light, the rock face with the color variation, the cuts too precise, the place that had been a threat and was now a fact, documented, analyzed, transmitted, acted upon. The thread that Emily had followed for 8 months and found the end of here in this valley, in this 36-hour window. At 0640, Marcus Cole turned away from the eastern ridge and walked back toward his Firebase. Han had a loose rung fixed and 30 men to account for, and a report to write that was going to require him to say things he had not expected to have to say when a civilian specialist stepped off a helicopter 3 days ago and he told her she was another responsibility. He had been wrong about that. I had been wrong about nearly everything that mattered until the information changed, and he adjusted because that was what professionals did, and because the woman who had just left on a helicopter heading east had shown him over 3 days in one very long night that the capacity to adjust was not a weakness in your original position. It was the whole point of having a position at all. At Firebase Kestrel, in the eastern mountains of Afghanistan, in the full light of a morning that 30 people had earned the right to see, Sergeant First Class Marcus Cole went back to work. And inside every soldier who had been present that night, something had changed that could not be unchanged. Not the memory of the firefight, not the specific shots or the signal data or the communication link restored through a targeting system by a woman they had been told was an engineer. Something deeper than all of that, the knowledge now permanent and unrevisable that the person standing next to you is never what they appear to be on the outside, and that the moment you decide you already know what someone is, you have stopped looking at them clearly. And in this work, in this life, the cost of not looking clearly is a cost that has to be paid by everyone around you. Emily Carter had walked off a helicopter with oversized gear and a manila folder and a notebook she never showed anyone, and she had known from the first moment exactly who she was and what she was there to do. And she had done it without asking any of them to believe in her before she had earned it, and she had earned it in the most complete way available, which was by showing up in the hardest moment and being exactly what the moment required. Not more than that, not performing it, not asking for recognition in the middle of it, just being it. That was the lesson Firebase Kestrel carried forward, not into reports and citations in the official record, though it was in all of those places too. Into the way Marcus Cole ran the Firebase after that morning, into the way Whitaker approached his craft after Fletcher worked him harder than he thought he needed to be worked, into the way Danny Okafor moved through the rest of his service with the knowledge that he had stayed on the north corner alone for 8 minutes, and that knowledge was a foundation nothing could take from him. Into the way Tara Kim wrote her signal analysis reports with her name fully on them, into 30 people who had been shown in a 36-hour window in the eastern mountains what it looked like when someone refused to be less than what they were, even when the entire world around them had decided in advance what that was. Emily Carter had been many things in 11 years and 9 deployments. A soldier, a marksman, an analyst, an operative moving through cover identities in places that required something other than the obvious truth. But in the years that followed, when the story of Firebase Kestrel was told, among the people who told such stories, she was described most often by the word that Sergeant Marcus Cole used in his official report, the word he chose after sitting with a blank page for 30 minutes and finding that all the other words were insufficient. He wrote exceptional, and then he wrote the thing beneath that word, the thing he wanted the record to hold. She was not exceptional because she was the best marksman, or because she read terrain better than anyone, or because she established a data link under fire and transmitted intelligence that changed the operational picture for 6 months. She was exceptional because when every person around her had already decided what she was, she simply continued to be what she actually was, without argument and without apology, until the truth became impossible to ignore. That was her mission, not the 9 deployments, not the cover identities, not the shots fired in the dark at specific angles with specific compensations that James Whitaker still thought about years later. The real mission was the one she had completed every single day in every single place she had ever stood, oversized gear and all. The mission of being without compromise or performance entirely herself. And that was a mission she had never once failed to complete.